this afternoon. About half our regional council rates are paid by earnings from Port of Tauranga. But Port of Tauranga could be making much more profit if they weren't constrained by not being able to expand operations. How can you sort this problem out if you are elected to council?
I've been closely involved with this over recent months and weeks. The government's going to sort it out, quite frankly. All of the environmental issues in terms of the Stellar Passage have been resolved. It's tied up in technicalities, and it's costing not just the region, the country, millions of dollars. We're turning ships away, cargoes are not being sent off. The port is incredibly frustrated. It comes back to the provisions of the Resource Management Act, and of course it was put on fast track. The government said, well, we've just got to move ahead with this because the judiciary is just going through and through all these processes, delay, frustration. So the port company applied for the fast track legislation, which is quite recent. They thought they were going there, and then the local Ngāti Kuku took a legal proceeding which has actually held up that as another step. So government, as the ministers have said just in recent weeks, they're going to step in and change it. It's done on a technicality. When they went for the fast track legislation, they said for the development of Sulphur Point, thinking that's sort of the port. But in fact there's two berthages, one on Sulphur Point and one back on Mount Maunganui. And because they didn't specify that, the judge said, I have no discretion, I've got to say no. So it was in the way that application was filed, but there's another clear paper is that the judge overstepped the mark. He was a new judge, he'd only been in the job about 6 months, and there's an element of interpretation in the way that he granted that extra holder. So that's what the government said. It was clearly the intent for the total package of development. It's nothing to do with the environment in terms of the sand deposition or impacts on the environment. All of those issues have been addressed. It's purely procedural, and it's just been used for leverage, and it's just been delayed for years, and it's costing us all millions of dollars.
Well, I agree with Ken that it's a government responsibility to resolve this issue. It's a major factor. I think we need to acknowledge the foresight of those many years ago who developed the port and turned it from a fishing port into the significant industry that it is today, and servicing most of New Zealand's exports and a very large percentage of imports too. It's critical to New Zealand's future, and I agree with Ken that it needs to be advanced, and we need to rely on the government to make sure that that happens. I would just like to add one point in regard the $48 million dividend that I referred to. It's about half, well, it says 48 in the Regional Council's pre-election report, so either way, it's near enough. But it also says that it's 23% of expenditure, not about half.
I wouldn't venture to improve on the answers given by Ken and John, especially with Ken's long-standing knowledge of the situation, but I would just add a couple of comments, and that is that, you know, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, from their point of view, they represent the Bay of Plenty, 334,000 population according to Google. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council needs to act in the interests of the entire Bay of Plenty, and the interests of the entire Bay of Plenty are best served by having the port expansion completed. As far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the story. But it's the government who will actually have the power to make it happen because of the way it's evolved. And the RMA is essentially the governing thing that's going to be determined. That's a central government issue.
I think we need to direct questions to particular people because do you want to?
Kia ora everyone. everyone. I would like to take an opportunity to share my view on the question around the Port of Tauranga and the expansion. Yes. You know, I am the first recipient of the Turirangi Tikani Tauranga, Port of Tauranga Memorial Scholarship. It was set up in the late 1980s and awarded in 1990. That's just to give you an indication of how long my family and my families have been involved in the port. So we were the contributors of land and we certainly supported the development of port. But I would never imagine that that should ever have been at the expense of our own health. So I will just say that while I understand that there is a New Zealand Inc. that requires this, our port in Tauranga to be the, you know, to provide the opportunity for the income that we're seeking, I have a different view. And I'm glad to have an opportunity to hear it. I think there's other options. So I think currently the option is all geared to the full thinking that without Tauranga, without the Port of Tauranga expanding, we're not going to achieve our goals as New Zealand. But I think to the network of ports that we have in our country, I know from a family of port workers that they aren't always busy all of the time. I would rather that we looked at utilising the full network that we have available across our whole country to manage the imports and exports. I think that there's some solution in that space. I imagine a time where if we're enabling whangārei and we're enabling down the line, down in the south, we're growing communities as well. You know, we're putting back to those spaces the people that can serve them. And so while Tauranga could have the lion's share of it all, I actually think there's a better solution for the whole country. And I think we should think about that. Because we've already got, you know, a whole network set and ready. We've got a workforce that don't always get jobs because Tauranga is the busy port. They either have to send their workers up here or they miss out on work. So my picture, my thinking is bigger than this. It's about the country and it's about how we can do better for more than just Tauranga. Even though I'm standing for the regional council and I absolutely support our region, you know, growth and development, but in the right way and at the right time. Thank you.
Kelly, do you want to say anything?